The T-34 is a Soviet medium tank produced from 1940 to 1958. It was the world's best tank when the Soviet Union entered the Second World War, and although its armor and armaments were surpassed by later World War II tanks, it is credited as the war's most effective, efficient, and influential design. It was the mainstay of the Soviet armed forces throughout World War II and widely exported afterwards. It was also the most produced tank of the war and the second most produced tank of all time. The T-34 had its predecessor's coil spring Christie suspensions, but was dispensed with the weight. It had a well-sloped armor, a relatively powerful engine, and wide tracks. The initial version had a 76.2mm gun, and in the 1944 a second major version with a larger turret mounting a larger 85mm gun.
Trench warfare was a type of warfare that was used extensively during World War I. It involved the use of trenches dug into the ground for the soldiers to take cover in order to protect themselves from enemy fire. In addition to trenches, barbed wire and other obstacles were placed at the front lines to make it difficult for enemy forces to advance. Additionally, artillery and machine guns were used to fire upon enemy lines from afar, and infantry soldiers would also be sent over the top of the trenches in order to fight in hand-to-hand combat. The use of trench warfare resulted in horrific casualties on both sides, with some estimates suggesting that 90% of the soldiers killed during World War I were killed in this manner.
Panzer tank, or more specifically, the Kampfwagen, meaning armored combat vehicle, was a type of armored vehicle that was extensively used by the German army during World War II. Developed in the 1930s, the Panzer was one of the most advanced tanks of its time and played a significant role in many of the major battles of the war. The Panzer was designed to be a versatile and mobile weapon system, capable of providing both offensive and defensive capabilities on the battlefield. It was heavily armored with thick steel plates that could withstand a variety of enemy attacks, including small arms fire, artillery shells, and anti-tank weapons. The tank was also equipped with a range of armaments, including a powerful main gun and a variety of machine guns that could be used to engage enemy infantry.
Greatest tank battles. The greatest tank battle in history started on July 4th, 1943, around the Russian city Kursk. The German Wehrmacht and the Russian Red Army would fight for weeks, with historians giving a tactical victory to the Russians. The Germans would use their new Panther tank against the Russian T-34 tank. The Panther was superior to the T-34, but the Russians had a lot of the T-34 tanks. At the end of the battle, historians estimate that the German army had lost about 500 tanks and about 200,000 men. The Russians had lost about 1,500 tanks and 860,000 men. Even though the losses were high for the Russians, the battle effectively ended Germany's campaign to conquer Russia. Some historians say it was the beginning of the end of World War II. The Space Shuttle was a space ship. The Space Shuttle was a reusable spacecraft and orbital launch system designed for space flight missions from 1981 to 2011. It was developed by NASA and incorporated elements from an airliner and a glider, and could carry up to 8 astronauts, equipment, and supply. The Space Shuttle performed more than 135 successful missions and was the world's first reusable spacecraft. It operated at speeds up to 17,500 miles per hour and even had its own robotic arm. The Space Shuttle also launched several satellites and the Hubble Space Telescope into space.
The T-34 is a Soviet medium tank produced from 1940 to 1958. It was the world's best tank when the Soviet Union entered the Second World War, and although its armor and armaments were surpassed by later World War II tanks, it is credited as the war's most effective, efficient, and influential design. It was the mainstay of the Soviet armed forces throughout World War II and widely exported afterwards. It was also the most produced tank of the war and the second most produced tank of all time. The T-34 had its predecessor's coil spring Christie suspensions, but was dispensed with the weight. It had a well-sloped armor, a relatively powerful engine, and wide tracks. The initial version had a 76.2mm gun, and in the 1944 a second major version with a larger turret mounting a larger 85mm gun.
Little is known about the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896, which is generally considered to be the shortest war in history, lasting for a grand total of 38 minutes. It all started with the signing of the Heliogoland-Zanzibar Treaty between Britain and Germany in 1890, after which Britain declared Zanzibar a protectorate of the British Empire and moved to install their own puppet sultan to look after the region, until on August 25, 1896, he died suddenly, leading a few to suspect that his cousin had him poisoned. After this, British chief diplomat Basil Cave quickly declared that Khalid should stand down, to which he was ignored. Cave already had 2 British ships offshore, with 2 more on the way. 9 a.m. on August 27th, British ships bombarded the palace, destroying the majority of its artillery along with most of the structure. By 9:40, the shelling had ceased, and the shortest war in history had officially ended after only 38 minutes. The Salem witch trials were a series of trials and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft that took place in colonial Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693. Around 200 people were accused of witchcraft, 20 were convicted, and 19 were executed. The trials began as a series of hearings in which witnesses were called to testify against alleged witches. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
All right, I'm going to keep going. But soon spiraled out of control and became rooted in paranoia, hysteria, and mass hysteria. The Salem witch trials are considered to be one of the most notorious examples of mass hysteria in history and served as a reminder of the fragility of justice and the power of fear. Now I'm done.
Prohibition was a period in the U.S. from 1920 to 1933 when the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol was prohibited. It was enacted as part of the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Prohibition was intended to reduce alcohol consumption and crime, but it instead led to an increase in organized crime and illegal activities. Prohibition was nearly unanimously considered a bad idea, but it did, however, give us NASCAR.
Takes Petty with him. And we're going to have a terrific crash here as nearly all the field is going to be involved in this crash. There are only about 10 or 12 cars that survived this melee just past the starting line.
Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. Rommel was highly decorated by the end of World War I, even receiving the Pour le Mérite, meaning for merit. It was the highest Royal Prussian Order of Bravery for officers of all ranks. In World War II, the commander of the 7th Panzer Division in World War II, he commanded the 7th Panzer Division during the 1940 invasion of France, where it was here his leadership of German and Italian forces in the North African campaign established his reputation as one of the ablest tank commanders in the war and earned him the nickname the Worcester Fox, the Desert Fox.
The Ford Model T was an automobile produced by the Ford Motor Company from 1908 to 1927. It was the first mass-produced car to be affordable by the average consumer, and it revolutionized transportation in the US and beyond. The Model T was affordable, reliable, and durable. It featured an innovative assembly line process that allowed it to be produced quickly and inexpensively, and was available in a variety of colors, as long as you chose black. And the Model T was produced in large numbers, with some 15 million being sold in the US alone. Today, the Model T is still an iconic symbol of the early automobile industry and is still remembered fondly by automotive enthusiasts around the world. Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras is a holiday celebrated mainly in the United States. According to research, Mardi Gras traces its origins back to ancient Roman festivals and medieval Europe's celebration of Carnival, which was a period of debauchery and celebration before Lent. Mardi Gras was also brought to North America by European settlers, and the first Mardi Gras celebration in the United States was held in Mobile, Alabama in 1703. From there, it spread across the country, becoming an annual tradition in cities such as New Orleans and New York.